Hello and welcome to another ramble around the churchyard. I'm Jeff Richards. I'm one of the trustees of the Friends of St Nicholas Churchyard, and today I want to take you inside the church rather than keep you in the churchyard. We can't meet in person, but we can actually meet online as we're doing here today to actually really explore the church during these extraordinary times. I'm going to be looking at, the title of the ramble is Per Ardua ad Astra, and so I'm going to be really taking note of the fact that this week had Battle of Britain Day, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. But I'm very grateful for all of the encouragement that we've received from Enjoy Sutton and Sutton Civic Society. Sutton Civic Society is really the group that lobbies the council, is very much interested in developing Sutton in a way that is beneficial for all of its inhabitants. And of course, Enjoy Sutton is part of the business group that represents some 450 businesses in central Sutton, where essentially the high street businesses and organisations. Thank you very much for all their assistance. Now I'm going to be touching on a number of different topics in today. The questions about, the history of the Second World War. I'm going to be touching on some of the social history, and if you want to learn more about Sutton's history and put it into the context of British and world history, then please do check out Sutton College's history and culture classes. Now, I said today was all about Battle of Britain Day, and the 15th of September 2020 is the day which is marked as the Battle of Britain Day. Now, the Battle of Britain Day was really fought at its peak 80 years ago, so it's the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Britain between July and October of 1940. And the 15th of September was the day in which probably the most decisive battle was fought in the skies over southern England. It marked that turning point when it was quite clear that the Germans could not achieve anywhere close to air dominance, and from that moment on the relationship started to turn, and it was clear that the Germans were not going to be able to threaten in existential way Britain anymore. Now, the reason I'm showing you an empty window here is that it also marks an important anniversary, because 80 years ago, during the Battle of Britain on the 23rd of September, a bomb was dropped in the churchyard, destroying the windows. Now, that was a subject of an exhibition last year called The Lost Windows, and so there's material online about that. But we do have that physical remembrance of the effects of the bombing that was caused on the 23rd of September 1940 with the bomb falling into the rectory garden. And it was all of that damage was replaced and repaired by the work of the War Damage Commission. It had a very profound effect on the windows within St Nicholas, and you can see the effects here of the windows all being destroyed. Now, the interesting aspect about this is that when you have such a terrible event like the destruction of the windows, like even here now, which we're experiencing COVID-19 and coronavirus, when we lose things, we can actually learn things from the material that remains. And from a church perspective, probably the most wonderful thing, as the commission notice says here, is that a few pieces of the original glass can still be seen in the windows. And one of these windows actually contains a wonderful sermon in glass after all of that destruction on the 23rd of September 1940. We see at the heart of St. Nicholas the message that now abideth faith, hope, love, these three. And so that message from St. Paul is something that St. Nicholas can take to heart and say that it doesn't matter what's happened in the past, it doesn't matter what happens to us, as long as these three still remain, still abide: faith, hope, and love. Now we have a very physical remembrance of the Battle of Britain and really the cost that the RAF paid in the defence of the islands within the memorials within the church. Inside St. Nicholas, we've got a war memorial that is from the school, which was Sutton High School for boys. That was a school that shut in Sutton in 1964, I think, and you can see that there are some 16 names of boys that are recorded on the war memorial. 11 of those names are actually, those 11 of those boys served and died while serving in the RAF. Every year, the remaining old boys from the school will gather and will record their appreciation and remembrance of their old colleagues by laying a wreath, and that's something that the rector of Sutton conducts and supervises. Now, I just want to share with you just one of the stories of the men from those 11 RAF stories that are contained within the war memorial. And this is of a young man called Douglas Warren. Now, Douglas Warren, we can see from this photograph, gives a sense of the humour of the man, because you know that there, and you might not actually get the sense of the pose that he's playing there, but actually he's mocking himself in displaying himself with the hand tucked into the tunic in a very effective way, similar to Pilot Officer Prune, who was really a self-deprecatory character, a cartoon character created during the Second World War by Anthony Armstrong and the cartoonist called Raff. Well, let's look then at Douglas Warren and understand his life. Douglas was born actually in 1917. So he lived in Cheam, his family came from Cheam, but he went to school at Sutton High. And he had married a lady called Mary just before the war, and they lived in Upper Gwelgrave Road. He volunteered in 1939 into the Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve, and he was called up in September of 1939. He was assigned to 248 Squadron, and this was part of Coastal Command. And so he flew he was a observer within a Bristol Blenheim, which was a bomber aircraft modified as a long-range fighter bomber and reconnaissance aircraft. And he set out in 1941 within his Bristol Blenheim, along with two other men, Squadron Leader Coates and Sergeant Douglas, and they were tasked with the location of the German pocket battleship, the Admiral Scheer. So we call it a pocket battleship, but it's a heavy cruiser, but it had been sent by Germany to protect its operations in Norway and within the Baltic. And so the mission took the crew along the southern Norwegian coast in the direction of the Baltic, and they had left their airfield at 7 a.m. But the crew failed to return to base and were then assumed to have been killed in action. Investigators looking into the incident after the war discovered a location of a crash and that the men had been buried. The location of the crash was in the vicinity of Kristiansand, and it looks like the plane had entered low cloud and had come into contact with hillside. The 3 crew members, Palmer, Coates and Douglas, were all buried close to where they died. And Douglas's own headstone says, "Rest thou among our best and noblest. Now thy long day's work hath ceased." I'm going to end today with a poem by Noel Coward, and this is about Bomber Command, where many of the boys on the War Memorial in St. Nicholas served. And it's unusual because, well, you don't think of Noel Coward actually doing much in the way of poetry necessarily, but he wrote poetry and he had a link to Sutton. He lived in Lenham Road for the first 6 years of his life within the parish of St. Nicholas. And so I'm going to switch over now and just read that poem. The poem is called "Lie in the Dark and Listen." Lie in the dark and listen. It's clear tonight, so they're flying high, hundreds of them, thousands perhaps, riding the icy moonlit sky, men, machinery, bombs and maps, altimeters, guns and charts, coffee, sandwiches, fleece-lined boots, bones and muscles and minds and hearts, English saplings with English roots, deep in the earth they've left below. Lie in the dark and let them go. Lie in the dark and listen. Lie in the dark and listen. They're going over in waves and waves, high above villages, hills and streams, country churches and little graves, and little citizens' worried dreams. Very soon they will have reached the seas, and far below them will lie the bays and cliffs and sands where they used to be taken for summer holidays. Lie in the dark and let them go. Theirs is a world we'll never know. Lie in the dark and listen. Lie in the dark and listen. City magnates and steel contractors, factory workers and politicians, soft, hysterical little actors, ballet dancers and reserved musicians. Safe in your warm civilian beds, count your profits and count your sheep. Life is passing above your heads. Just turn over and try to sleep. Lie in the dark and let them go. There's one debt you'll forever owe. Lie in the dark and listen. You can find more videos that tell the story of St. Nicholas Church on the YouTube channel, so please do subscribe. Thank you again to everyone who supports the channel, and if you want to know more about any of the topics that we've looked at in today's ramble, then please do check out Sutton College. They've got great history and culture classes, so that's suttoncollege.ac.uk. We've come to the end of the ramble. I do hope that you've enjoyed that. For now, I'll say goodbye. So long, Sutton. Your history